Rumors can spread like wildfire, and in cases involving missing children, they can quickly drown out the fragile thread of truth investigators are trying to follow. Over the past weeks, online conversations have reignited around the disappearance of Summer Wells, the little girl from Tennessee who vanished without a trace in June 2021. What sparked this new wave of speculation was a claim that Candus Bly, Summer's mother, had confessed to being involved in her daughter's disappearance. But the reality is starkly different. There is no evidence, no official statement, and no confirmation from law enforcement to support these claims. And yet, the narrative caught hold, fueled by viral clips, misinterpreted interviews, and the relentless machinery of social media. Before we move deeper into the story, make sure you hit the subscribe button and turn on the bell so you don't miss critical updates on this case and others like it. In stories as complex and painful as this one, separating truth from rumor is essential, and your awareness can make the difference. The spark that ignited the frenzy was a handful of online posts claiming that Candus had admitted to hurting her daughter. These posts spread fast, shared by social media users who often included dramatic captions, edited video clips, and unverified inside information. Within hours, what began as whispers in private groups became viral content, drawing in millions of views across platforms like YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, and Reddit. The power of repetition gave these claims an aura of legitimacy. People began quoting them as though they were facts, even though not a single law enforcement agency, local, state, or federal, had confirmed anything of the sort. This is not new. In almost every major missing child case, the family finds itself at the center of speculation. It's an unfortunate pattern. The parents, the siblings, or anyone close to the child are often the first to be scrutinized. Part of this comes from a very real truth that investigators often begin close to home, but part of it is also shaped by how the public processes grief, suspicion, and the need for answers. In Summer's case, Candus's behavior in public interviews, her mannerisms, and her words have been pulled apart and analyzed endlessly. Clips from interviews where Candus repeated her denial, saying, "I didn't do anything to my daughter," were reframed as though they contained hidden meaning. Some online sleuths argued that the very fact she repeated herself proved she was lying. Others zoomed in on her tone of voice, the length of her pauses, or her body language, insisting they had spotted signs of deception. The truth, though, is far more complicated. Grief, shock, and trauma can affect people in ways that appear unusual or even suspicious. What one person interprets as guilt could, in reality, be the manifestation of unbearable stress and sorrow. The Dr. Phil interview remains one of the most infamous moments in this case. When Candus walked off the set after feeling cornered, it became a permanent piece of online speculation. To some, her reaction was evidence she had something to hide. To others, it was simply the breaking point of a grieving mother pushed to the edge under a spotlight too harsh to endure. That single moment continues to be replayed, clipped, and recirculated online as though it represents proof of guilt. This is where public perception becomes dangerous. When narratives built on rumor gain more attention than official updates, the real facts of the case become blurred. Law enforcement agencies have repeatedly stated there is no confession, no verified evidence pointing to Candus, and no resolution in sight. Yet the sheer volume of speculation online has created a competing reality, one where opinion outweighs fact and denial is seen as guilt. This isn't unique to Summer Wells' case. Consider the example of Casey Anthony, whose daughter Kaylee's disappearance and death became one of the most watched trials in American history. Even before Anthony went to trial, her behavior, partying, lying to investigators, and her inconsistent stories shaped public opinion so strongly that the courtroom itself seemed like an afterthought. The jury found her not guilty of murder, but to this day, public opinion has never shifted. Her every movement was examined, her every word dissected, and those impressions hardened into permanent conclusions. The same dynamic shaped the JonBenet Ramsey case. In the early days after the 6-year-old beauty queen was found dead in her Colorado home, suspicion fell on her parents. From the ransom note to their television interviews, every action was interpreted through a lens of suspicion. Years later, DNA evidence suggested an intruder may have been involved, but for many, the idea that her parents were guilty had already crystallized beyond repair. Even the disappearance of Madeline McCann, a case that stretched across continents, saw her parents accused and vilified in the court of public opinion. Though investigators cleared them, online speculation has never fully faded. The pattern is clear. Once the seed of suspicion is planted, it's almost impossible to uproot, especially in the age of social media. And in Summer Wells' case, that seed has grown into a tangled forest of theories, accusations, and finger-pointing. What makes this even more damaging is how it overshadows the central truth, the heartbreaking reality that Summer Wells is still missing. Amid all the debates over body language, tone, and speculation about confessions that never happened, the most urgent fact is left in the shadows. A 5-year-old girl vanished, and no confirmed answers have been found. This is not to say public interest has no value. Many times, community pressure and awareness have kept cases alive, ensuring they don't fade from memory. Public involvement can generate tips, leads, and renewed energy. But when speculation becomes louder than evidence, it risks damaging investigations, harming families, and spreading misinformation. The psychology behind this public reaction is also worth examining. When faced with a mystery as haunting as a missing child, people crave answers. Silence from investigators, long stretches without updates, and the endless uncertainty drive people to fill in the blanks themselves. Social media platforms thrive on this instinct. They reward dramatic content, reward certainty even when it's false, and amplify the voices of those who speak with confidence rather than caution. A pause in an interview becomes proof. A denial becomes evidence. And before long, rumor solidifies into what feels like fact. But grief does not fit neatly into public expectations. People under stress may avoid eye contact, speak haltingly, or react in ways that seem unusual. Trauma can mimic the very signs people associate with guilt. That is why body language analysis, especially by amateurs online, is so unreliable. Yet, in cases like this, it becomes a foundation for entire theories. Beyond the legal tangle, the human cost is profound. There is no mistaking that the center of this nightmare is a 7-month-old baby who cannot speak for himself. The images of bruises, the reports of untreated injuries, and the cries that neighbors recall are gut-wrenching. If the allegations are true, Emmanuel's final days were marked by pain and neglect that should never be allowed to occur in any community. That reality should focus urgency not just on punishment, but on prevention, how to better identify and protect at-risk children before the worst happens. Community reaction has been immediate and fierce. Candlelight vigils, social media campaigns, and public outrage have spread quickly. Hashtags and calls for accountability trend, while others float bitter questions about system failure. Social platforms produce both vital leads and harmful misinformation. Tip lines fill with both credible and speculative leads. Authorities urge the public to channel information productively. Turn over dash cam clips, forgotten security footage, or direct knowledge to investigators rather than amplify unverified rumors. Those credible tips can be the difference between a cold trail and a breakthrough. At the same time, the frenzy of speculation can contaminate evidence, intimidate witnesses, and complicate the search for truth. For the investigation to move forward properly, two things are essential: rigorous forensic work and public patience for verified facts. Forensic teams continue to process seized vehicles and analyze digital devices, all while search teams keep scouring likely locations. If remains are found, DNA testing and pathology will be the next steps, followed by careful legal work to present the findings in court. If no remains are recovered, prosecutors will rely more heavily on circumstantial evidence, medical records, and testimony to show that abuse occurred and led to death. Both paths demand time, resources, and a courtroom-ready chain of custody. This case also forces a broader reckoning. When repeated signs of harm are present, bruises, cries, prior incidents, who bears responsibility for stepping in? Families, neighbors, medical professionals, and child protection systems all share roles. Sometimes the best intentions and the law's limits collide in tragic ways. Removal of a child requires legal grounds. Wholesale intervention without solid proof risks further harm. Still, when patterns of risk emerge, the urgency should sharpen. Public agencies must review and learn. Communities must cultivate the courage to report and follow up, and policymakers must consider whether thresholds and resources are adequate to protect children at risk. None of this diminishes the crucial legal principles at play. The accused are entitled to due process, a vigorous defense, and an impartial trial. But due process and the need for careful investigation exist alongside a community's right to demand accountability and answers. The challenge is to hold both truths, the need for methodical, evidence-based prosecution, and the moral imperative to protect children, at once. If you have credible information, footage, a memory of a vehicle, a detailed overlook at the time, report it directly to investigators. Law enforcement has set up dedicated lines for tips and encourages anonymous reporting through established hotlines. Every verifiable piece of information matters. This story is still unfolding. The most sensational claims, the whispered confession, the alleged burial, must be tested against evidence that will stand in court. The arrests and charges reflect investigators' current assessments, but they are only the beginning of an adversarial process that will test every claim and every piece of proof. In the meantime, hold the human truth at the center. A child's life was cut short under troubling circumstances, and the community and the legal system must work together to find the full truth, provide accountability, and, crucially, prevent future tragedies. Keep asking hard questions. Share only verified information, and support the work of investigators as they follow leads. Justice for Emmanuel depends on evidence, not rumor, on steady pressure, not frantic conjecture, and on a commitment from all of us to ensure that silence never again becomes a child's fate. If you have credible information related to this case, contact the Riverside County Sheriff's Homicide Detail. The search for truth must be relentless, for the sake of Emmanuel, for his family, and for every child whose cries must never be ignored.